One of the best parts of any trip is simply rolling out of the driveway. Here, the anticipation is at its highest, with all the experiences to come still unknown. 17 days may as well be 17 years. There are no thoughts yet of that long drive home. There's also an underlying bit of anxiety that builds on that excitement. The questions: did we forget anything? Will we have any mechanical problems? Will the routes pan out? There's a sense of relief that all the preparation and planning are done and that the plan is finally being executed. And while we are not forging any new paths into the unknown, it is all new and unknown and special to us. New roads, new countries, and new vistas await. At least after a few hours of our all too well-known Interstate 5 before we hit the Canadian border. Alright guys, so we are officially on the road north. The only problem is that's North I-5 in standstill traffic, so let's hope that changes soon. And, well, the traffic never really did get any better until we got off the freeway in Sumas, Washington, where our border crossing into Canada was. And here we would have our first experience with how stern and unemotional the Canadian border agents really could be. Hi. Yes, sir.
How many people in the vehicle?
2.
Where do you live?
Oregon.
Everything in the vehicle belongs to the two of you?
Yes, sir. And while it was by no means a bad experience, it was simply in contrast to what we'd experience on both of the U.S. border crossings later on in the journey. And once we were through and into Canada, we still had about 250 miles to go before our first planned stop at a rest area just south of Catch Creek in BC. Alright guys, so this is it, our first camp of the trip. Amazingly beautiful rest area. So it took longer than planned to get out of Oregon, and then there was construction we had to wait for up here in BC, so we got here a couple hours later than I was hoping for, but we made the whole distance I was hoping for, so we put in about 500 miles yesterday afternoon and last night, and so we are here just south of Catch Creek, BC, and today is our long day. We'll be putting in about twice the mileage, about 1,000 miles today, and we'll be right up near the Yukon border territory by the time we camp tonight. So here we are, that's the plan. We'll take you along for the ride. How you feeling to start day 2?
Mm-hmm.
Yay!
Continue on Highway 1.
Despite having an absolutely massive mileage goal for the day's drive, we did afford ourselves a few stops and enjoyed the very smoky BC scenery on the way to Dawson Creek. So it only took driving pretty much nonstop since Friday afternoon to get to mile 0. So now the real part of it begins.
Woo! Ready?
Yep. Energized by finally reaching a major milestone in our journey, We gamely continued on throughout the day, enjoying the sights that BC had to offer. As day transitioned to evening, and evening into night, we began to realize that our mileage goal, or my mileage goal, probably wasn't realistic. As the evening animals came out to play, and my reflexes slowed, I decided to call it about 80 miles earlier than what I had planned. But, as always, much better safe than sorry. Well, believe it or not, this is the light at 3:45 a.m. So we had to stop a little earlier than planned. Last night, my planned distance was just a little too great, so we stopped just past Laird River, which is that way. So we're getting up early so we can make up the difference here this morning and keep on trucking on. So super beautiful spot, nice and quiet, lots of birds, saw plenty of wildlife last night, so it was a pretty fun drive even in the dark and with some rain. So we're gonna get packed up, as little as that entails, and we'll see you on the road. In the first half of the day, the Yukon Territory absolutely put on a show for us. And that was much appreciated, because by the second half of the day, the roads would begin to beat those good memories right out of us. Thankfully, Dawson City wasn't that much farther out, and it was a much welcome reprieve from the road. This remote outpost, situated at the confluence of the Klondike and Yukon rivers, played a pivotal role in the gold rush of the late 19th century. It was during that time that Jack London penned his iconic short story, To Build a Fire, a tale of survival in the harsh wilderness of the Yukon. In the story, the unnamed protagonist struggles to stay alive in the bitter cold, relying solely on his ability to start a fire to keep him alive. Today, Dawson City itself represents that same life-giving fire. Its rugged, pioneering spirit continues to burn bright, attracting adventurers and travelers from all over the world. The town is the gateway to the pristine wilderness of the Yukon Territory and Alaska beyond, offering a chance to experience the majesty of the natural world in all of its raw, untamed beauty. But even after traveling for 2,100 miles just to get to this point, our time in Dawson will only be a brief respite before continuing on. But nevertheless, a journey in locations like this compel us to take the time to remember the past and the power of the human spirit to attempt to overcome the most challenging of circumstances. Just like the man in Jack London's classic story. If you don't know how the story goes, I highly recommend that you give it a read. But since we are traveling in summer, I expect our fate to be much more favorable. Now, sometimes that human spirit we talked about earlier, in fact, does not overcome certain circumstances. And sometimes, in those situations, that human spirit must give up at least a part of its physical self. Like, say a toe that has fallen victim to frostbite. Over the last 50 years, it is said that over 25 such toes have been donated to the Sourdough Saloon. And if you have the courage, you can join the club, established in 1973 by Captain Dick Stevenson, originally using a toe preserved from the 1920s, by knocking back a shot of Yukon Jack, fortified with a severed, mummified human toe. While the club may no longer be small, it still feels pretty special to be part of such a unique group of freaks, willing to bounce a severed toe off their lips in the name of proving themselves true Yukoners.
Certainly not from tonsils. Cheers, Adrian. Salute. Beautiful. Nicely done. All right. Here you go. Welcome to the Sourdough Club. Official member. 50 years. Just right here. Are we all ready? Okay. You can drink it fast, you can drink it slow, but your lips must touch this nasty toe. Not your teeth, not your tongue, and certainly not your tonsils. Cheers, Nicole. Salute. Good girl. Easy peasy. Welcome to the Sourdough Club.
And with the ritual behind us, we were all too ready to settle in for a great night's sleep in a real bed. And while Dawson City is a destination in itself, it is just the beginning of our adventures. We took an easy start to the morning, enjoying a few last scenes of this fantastic little town, while fueling up for the day's drive. But ever onward we must go, and just getting out of town will involve another new experience for us, the George Black Ferry. That's right, to cross the mighty Yukon here requires a ferry ride. Once the river thaws in the spring, the ferry runs 24/7. There is no cost, as it is considered an extension of the Yukon Highway system. It arrived in Dawson on June 14, 1967, after a 7-day journey from Whitehorse that involved running aground on sandbars on 2 separate occasions. Able to carry loads of up to 143,000 pounds and vehicles up to 83 feet long and 17 feet wide, the George Black can handle pretty much anything that will be coming through Dawson City under its own power. Now, on the west side of the Yukon River, we are on the top of the World Highway, or Yukon Highway 9 on a lot of maps. Aptly named, this road stays high on the ridgelines and affords stunning views to the north, with the peaks of Tombstone Territorial Park and the surrounding countryside. As it seemed to be the norm when researching this trip, opinions on the difficulty of this road varied greatly. Everything from a treacherous white-knuckle drive to it just being an easy, mostly gravel road. And while I'm sure weather conditions will definitely play a part, our experience was an easy gravel road. This is the kind of thing we are quite used to, though a typical RVer may certainly not be. Conditions were great, the views were beautiful, and before we knew it, we had covered the 79 miles to the border crossing. Poker Creek is the northernmost international border crossing in North America, and by simply crossing an imaginary line, we will gain an extra hour to our day. The crossing was easy and made enjoyable by the U.S. border agents that talked and joked with us in a way that made it clear they have a pretty awesome job up here in the north.
Doing this drive from Oregon?
Yes. Yep.
Whose idea was it?
It was pretty concurrent between the two of us. Yeah.
You still like each other?
Yeah.
You're all set. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. After crossing into the U.S., you have a stretch of about 14 miles that is called the Boundary Spur Road, and it is beautifully paved and in perfect condition. Now, don't expect this to last, as that eventually turns into gravel at the Jack Wade Junction and is now called Alaska 5, or more commonly, the Taylor Highway. Get used to using highway names and not the numbers. Otherwise, people will think you're from the lower 48. The Taylor quickly changes up the scenery as you drop much lower into the landscape, and you're soon on a small gravel road next to a little creek nestled in the surrounding hills. And despite the official sign we had stopped at earlier, it finally sinks in that we are in Alaska.
So on this trip, we have so far have been on so many different types of roads. Gravel roads, paved roads, pothole-filled roads, and now we appear to be on a whoop-de-doo road, mixed with massive potholes and potential Dukes of Hazzard ramps just added in for funsies. Yeah. Been a real adventure.
Passing through Chicken, we had a long yet beautiful drive south on the Tote Cutoff and Glen highways. It felt odd to simply be passing through Anchorage at this point, but before we could spend time here, we had business further south. The drive from Anchorage to Seward has to be one of the most stunning drives that you can take that is that close to a major city. Anchorage feels like a big city, primarily because it's geographically large. It feels very spread out, but it still doesn't feel like a quote-unquote big city. And the sheer amount of activities and natural beauty within a reasonable driving distance is mind-boggling. And heading towards the Kenai provides you with some of the very best of that. Resurrection, the act of rising from the dead. Now I've never, not even technically, been dead, but I'm not sure I was ever truly alive before waking up in this place. Our first night truly in Alaska, thousands of miles from the only state that I've called home, parked on a gravel bar of the Resurrection River, fed directly by a mighty glacier. All this eventually flowing into Resurrection Bay in the Pacific Ocean. Apparently, in 1792, Alexander Baranov, a Russian trader and merchant, felt similar. It's said that Baranov was forced to retreat into the bay during a storm, and when that storm lifted, it was Easter Sunday. The bay and the river we are camped in were named Resurrection in honor of that day. And despite this obviously being a popular stop for overlanders from all over the world, the feeling here is still of being somewhere special, close to nature, and relatively far from modern society. Everyone here is living simply and free, with a world of possibilities awaiting us after the morning coffee. With the Resurrection Peaks to our north and Mount Benson to our south, we feel safely enclosed here on the riverbed as we begin to pack up camp. Soon, we really will be flying free towards an experience of a lifetime, where we had a date with Seward Helicopter Tours. Touching an Alaskan glacier was one of Nicole's primary goals on this trip, and this was the best way to absolutely guarantee that that would happen. If you're debating if the cost of something like this is worth it, well, just stop, because it is. Is it a little touristy? Sure, but you'll be able to see why it's worth it. Now, we all know that water is what sustains our lives here on Earth. But simply knowing is another thing entirely to seeing it up close in person. One of the sources of that water. With ice thousands of years old and hundreds, if not thousands of feet thick, you rightly feel small. And even smaller still when you take into account the vastness of the glaciers just in this one general area of Alaska. There are simply too many to name. And yet, there is still a feeling of fragility to these incredibly vast landscapes. There is no denying the changes happening to environments like these in our current age, and I would implore you to visit them while you can.
We are here at which glacier?
This is Hawk Glacier.
Hawk Glacier, and we're here with our pilot Jimmy, and he just took us on an amazing ride. So thank you. There you go.
While our time on the glacier was much too short, we weren't yet done with this area. Resurrection Bay was named during a time of contention between the Russians and the indigenous tribes, eventually resulting in the Battle of Sitka, while some sort of peace was eventually made between Baranov and the Tlingit chief Catlian. By the 1940s, conflict had returned. This time, with Alaska now a part of the United States, Fort McGilvery was established to defend Seward and the Alaska Railroad against the fears of a Japanese invasion. After American and Canadian forces reclaimed Attu and Kiska Islands in the Aleutian Islands Campaign between May and August of 1943, Alaska ordered the installations dismantled in March of 1944. Many of the constructions were not yet fully completed. The guns were disassembled and shipped to locations in South Dakota and San Diego, and the buildings were abandoned. In 1971, the Canes Head Recreation Area was established, and in 1984, the work to clear the old military roads began, and in 2022, the site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Today, you have a few options to access Canes Head and Fort McGilvery, hiking, kayaking, and water taxi being the primary means. As the tide charts did not cooperate with us hiking all the way in, we elected for a water taxi from Miller's Landing to get us to Cane's Head, where we no longer had to worry about the tides. If you love history, a nice little hike, and maybe even a boat ride, this trip is well worth the time. Once we were back on the river, we would have our first real opportunity to actually fully set up camp, cook a dinner, and just relax. Of course, that would be the time that we would have to deal with a little rain. Our goals with our food for this trip were primarily easy preparation and definitely easy cleanup. We primarily used a combination of pre-cooked chicken and beef strips with the boil and bag rice packets that made life very easy. A variety of sauces kept things interesting. Camp life was kept interesting with periodic blasting from the roadwork around Seward. The morning broke even wetter than the evening before, and we set off for the west side of the Kenai. Of course, the weather eventually cleared a bit, and we were afforded some great views of Mount Redoubt and Iliamna. While we made a roadside breakfast that was much drier than it would have been at camp. We were on this side of the Kenai to hit a couple of those checklist locations. We would be stopping at Anchor Point, which is the furthest west you could drive on the National Highway system, and then driving out onto the Homer Spit, which is the longest road into ocean waters in the world. The day had returned to being a bit gray, and the clouds moved back in, killing the volcano views we would have had at my tentative camp location of Whiskey Gulch. We are currently sitting here at Whiskey Gulch, which is where I kind of plan to camp. Across the way, if there weren't clouds, you would have amazing views of the volcanoes, but those views are gone now. We had them earlier when we came through, so I stopped and got them then with the camera just to make sure. But yeah, so I think we're going to move on. We're going to head back up north to around the Kenai River and see if we can find a good spot to camp there. I've got one known good spot that I stole from someone else, so if we end up there, you'll see that. If that's full, if it's got somebody there, then we'll have to pick out something else. And while the weather gods were not cooperative, the campsite gods, however, were merciful. From my research, this is actually a well-known location by locals, but while there were people on the other side, the prime famous spot was wide open. We got everything set up and had a wonderful, relaxing evening. It was just what we needed.
When I fantasize deep sleep, big heat, cover
this one was worth moving on for. Well guys, we have woken up to a pretty beautiful morning here. The rain finally stopped somewhere during the night, 1, 2 a.m. And things are clearing off now. We've got one hill up behind us that the clouds are burning off of. Got a beautiful sunrise. Got a little seagull friend, I'm sure you've seen by now in the video. So we've got a couple neighbors just down the beach. But they've been very quiet, respectful. It's very nice. So yeah, no complaints. A couple mosquitoes this morning, but nothing too crazy. So definitely worth waiting out the rain here last night. So I think we're gonna have a beautiful day. We're gonna be heading back up to the Anchorage area. I've got a cabin rented, a little rustic public use cabin rented for a couple days up there, so we can check out Anchorage and kind of mess around. So I'm not sure how much of that will show in the video. Not sure how interesting that'll end up being for this type of thing, but we'll see. We might show you some highlights. But as soon as Nick gets up, we'll be actually taking the time to make some real breakfast for once. Haven't done much of that yet this trip. We didn't even eat dinner last night. We ate lunch kind of late. Our time frames and when we're doing things has been pretty off and weird since we've been traveling so much, but the miles have definitely been worth it, and it's only going to get better from here. So after we spend some time in Anchorage and Eagle River, we'll be heading up towards Denali, doing the Denali Highway. Got a cool spot planned for just after that, and then we'll be rolling up to just basically going through Fairbanks, probably be a fuel and resupply stop, and then we'll be hitting the Dalton Highway. So we'll see. We'll see what transpires up there, but that's days away still, so got lots of good stuff to check out here. But gotta say, Alaska is pretty amazing so far. Today, we are beginning episode 3 by, somewhat reluctantly, leaving behind the beautiful Kenai Peninsula. Our first stop heading back north was the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. This is a great opportunity to get to make sure that you see at least most of the animals on your Alaskan list. This is a refuge for sick, wounded, and orphaned animals, and they get to live their lives in a stunning setting at the end of the Turnagain Arm near Portage. The main destination for the day was Eagle River, just about 10 miles north of Anchorage proper. There, we had rented a small public use cabin in the Eagle River campground, which is a part of Chugach State Park. We spent a total of 2 days here, experiencing various parts of the city. Well guys, it is Friday morning here in Eagle River, so enjoying the cabin life. Today's our first, well, and only full day here in the Anchorage area, so we've got some kind of maintenance items planned. We're going to do some laundry, get things cleaned up before we hit the road. We're going to hit the Alaska Native Heritage Center today and then see what else we've got. Yesterday we basically just got checked into the cabin here, had a nice lunch, and then had a great dinner at Matanuska Brewing. So it was a good food day. We're both very full, uncomfortably full, but the cabin's a blast. Having a little fire is nice inside. So got some things. Got to spend some time checking out on the rig. On the rig today. got some new noises and everything after the really rough roads into Dawson. So I'm going to spend some time on the truck and see what's up there also. So should be a good day, and anything of interest, we'll take you along for the ride. If you're going to be in Anchorage, do make time to visit the Alaska Native Heritage Center. It is well worth a visit to learn more about the indigenous tribes of Alaska and what they have gone through and have had to endure. Taking the tour of the 6 different village types from each tribe was very interesting, and made even better by our guide that interspersed facts with a fantastic dry sense of humor and deadpan delivery.
They'd be this long because when they're cutting up whales, they have a chance of exploding.
What they'd use these for is that if they didn't have enough wood to make the frame of the house, they'd use these instead. If a whaling captain passed away, they'd use one of these as a gravestone. Today we use these as places for tourists to take pictures.
So here is the traditional entrance, and they'd enter backwards because they'd be wearing the regalia, and on the back of it would be their clan symbol. And it would show that they're a part of the clan. If someone were to enter forward back then, they'd be seen as an intruder and they'd get hit in the head. All of you don't have to worry about that today.
Our time at the cabin also gave me a chance to do some evaluation on the Yukon's tires. On the way south out of Canada, I had noticed that the front pair were both wearing on the inside edges, the left worse than the right. I mostly blame the Dalton Highway heading into Dawson City for this. There were 2 or 3 impacts here that made me question if the wheels had been knocked completely off the truck. The second part of the blame lies with myself for forgetting to install my Dirt King locking alignment cams in all the preparation leading up to the trip. On inspection, I found nothing loose or damaged and decided to rotate the left side tires, spread out the wear, and continue to monitor the right front for now. After 2 days of some urban exploration and extremely good eating, visit 49th State Brewing if you get the chance. We were once again heading north. The plan was to make the short side trip to Talkeetna with the slim hope of seeing Denali outside of the clouds. It's said that only 30% of visitors get to see the mountain when it's out, and we were in the lucky few, getting to see the entire 20,310 feet of this magnificent mountain. While we have had, and will have more, moments of rain on this visit, the weather has definitely smiled down on us when it counted most. With a breakfast of waffle pops, yes, waffle pops in our bellies, and making a stop at the Talkeetna Historical Society Museum, we got out of town just as the tour buses were getting in, unloading the great cruise ship masses. That is an experience I can do without. Backtracking to the Parks Highway brought us to Cantwell for fuel in the beginning of the 135-mile-long Denali Highway. We were looking at putting in about 50 miles today and then peeling off the main road to find camp. During this trip, I have often found myself incapable of describing what it's really like to be here in any meaningful way. The Denali Highway highlights that to full effect. There really aren't words to describe the feelings, and the videos, even if made in more capable hands than mine, just can't do it justice. The vast expanses of green, broken up by shimmering lakes and streams, the natural, wide spacing of the low trees of the boreal forest, with giant mountains lining the horizon. This is what wilderness should feel like, and if we get a say in our own afterlife, this is my heaven. As much as I love the untouched portions of the landscape, I have to say that I am grateful that various human activities have left us access ways into this landscape. Valdez Creek Road is one of those access ways. One of the larger offshoots on the Denali, it takes you far off the relatively more beaten path. My goal on the map was a lake at the very end of the road. Later in my research, I put it together that this was the same lake that is in Lifestyle Overland's Alaska series, Roosevelt Lake. As the Eagles once sang, there is no more new frontier. And so we go, as we have before here, on the shoulders of giants. And in various places of this little road, actual shoulders of actual giants could have come in handy, as it becomes more creek than road, and I'm sure traveling just a little earlier in the season of what has been a very wet year would have made a couple of these areas beyond my comfort level. The water became a fun version of choose your own adventure, making our way through the creek and its vegetation, occasionally stopping to actually check the water depth before crossing. When we reached the last approach down to the lake, the trail was narrow and deeply rutted with standing water. Now, reviewing the footage, it actually doesn't look all that bad now, but in the moment, I made the disappointingly responsible decision not to go any further, worried that we would be able to get down and end up not being able to get back up the sloppy incline with our heavy truck. When rolling solo, play it safe. So instead, we explored a couple tracks that went above the lake and found a nice little spot with a great view. As we got out to set up camp, Nicole eventually noted that were some bear prints, and then a lot of bear prints, interspersed with a lot of moose prints. It seemed our little spot was quite the large animal highway. Man, there are a lot of bear tracks up here. Big bear tracks and some pretty darn good sized moose too. And with how much vegetation there is, you just can't see anything. So being Alaska newbies, we're a little paranoid about potential bear situation. There were so many up here. They could be laying on the other side of some brush and you'd never even know it. So we're gonna head back down the trail. Just getting up here to see that Roosevelt Lake is a win in and of itself. So we're gonna be happy with that. Play it safe since we're alone and head back down. So we'll take you along. We'll show you where we end up. Alright guys, so this is where we've ended up for the night. We've got those epic peaks in the background there. And then on the other side, we've got the snowy mountains and a giant glacier over there you can see. Tons of mosquitoes. And then over here, we've got the Susitna River Valley. So not a bad spot, nice and open, good visibility. So shouldn't have bear issues. And so for dinner, we're just going to do sandwiches so we don't have to cook, make any smells that we don't need to. So that's the plan. We'll see you soon. getting further north, and the sun finally set behind the surrounding 9,000-foot peaks at right around midnight. And it wasn't long before morning arrived, and we were off to see the eastern half of the Denali Highway. You're soon traveling on an esker, which is a sinuous ridge of silt, sand, and gravel that were carried and deposited by a stream that flowed within a glacier, and it was confined by the walls of ice. When that glacier melted away, these deposits are left behind as elongated mounds. Eskers along this highway are some of North America's most outstanding examples of this type of glacial feature. Things fairly quickly transitioned to a more open tundra-like landscape, though still with stunning glacier-covered peaks on the horizons. As you get nearer to the west end, you'll get to cross McLaren Pass, which is the second highest road pass in the state at 4,086 feet. The official sign, which we didn't even get footage of, is hilariously at a much lower point on the road than the actual high point, and we passed it before even thinking that it should be there. But the sign has a great viewpoint, so I guess that's what counted when placing it. The Tangle Lakes Archaeological District comprises a large portion of the east end of the highway. This district has some of the densest concentrations of archaeological resources in the North American subarctic. More than 500 archaeological sites indicate that ancient peoples have inhabited this area for at least 10,000 years. We had a ways to go up the Richardson Highway towards my planned camp area of Rainbow Basin. The road that we would be taking goes up behind Rainbow Ridge, which is a prominent feature on the highway, and runs all the way up alongside the Canwell Glacier, although we were going to turn off more into the basin area for camp. Since it was still fairly early in the day, we went up the Richardson Highway another 4 miles or so to a trail alongside Kastner Creek. Not that long ago, there was an ice arch and cave at the end of the Kastner Glacier. I had read the entrance collapsed last summer, and we wanted to make the hike to see where things stand this year. We had a blast on the trail, as it pretty much disappears for a while, looking at all the different kinds of rocks that the glacier has moved and forced down from the mountains. There is an amazing variety here, and it was hard to keep Nicole from taking them all back to the truck. We eventually reached the toe of the glacier, and on your right is a rectangular vertical wall that is now separated from the rest of the glacier. On the left is the glacier proper that was once connected to the other side. Rockfall is a constant concern as they slip and fall from the vegetation-covered top.
That's kind of a big one.
It's a humbling thing to stand beside something this old and to get to share an extremely brief part of its extremely long but rapidly ending life. Trip reports from this year say the cave is still accessible, but with the amount of water, we didn't even attempt to go around to the other side. With a truly special experience under our belts, we made the hike out, and it was time to head to the Red Rock Canyon Trail to see Rainbow Basin. This is an area more often frequented by ATVs than full-size trucks, but it is entirely doable. After a ways on the trail, the road splits, with one section continuing to run up on the moraine alongside the Canwall Glacier, and the other rounding the side of Rainbow Ridge and tucking back into the basin. There was a small lake back there that I was wanting to try to get to, and we ended up passing right by where we could have turned, because once again it seemed more like a creek than a trail. It actually took a little while to realize this, but it was a great drive nonetheless. On the way back down, we elected to forego attempting the water crossings and went back to a beautiful large open spot to make camp. After dinner and a good night's rest, an easy morning with a beautiful sunrise and our bellies full of elk bacon, we hit the trail to make our way to Fairbanks for fuel and a Walmart resupply, and then on to the Dalton Highway. For episode 4, we are taking on the 414-mile Dalton Highway. And 414 miles is a little misleading. That number starts in Livingood, and there is basically nothing in Livingood. So really, you're starting in Fairbanks, 80 miles away. So it's best to think of driving this road kind of like climbing a mountain. Dead Horse is the summit. You're only halfway done, and you still have to get back down, in this case, to Fairbanks. So a 414-mile highway soon becomes a 1,000-mile round trip back to civilization. There was a fairly long stretch of road work going on this summer around Hess Creek, and we followed a pilot truck in a line of rigs around that area. There was a pause at a blasting zone where Nick took the opportunity for some personal hygiene. After all of the construction, we pulled over for a quick bathroom break, to clean the windshield, and to just let all of that built-up traffic naturally spread out. Here, we found ourselves behind a truck towing a boat that was dragging his left taillight and a chunk of metal down the road. Between his questionable driving choices and being completely oblivious to my attempts to get his attention, he was not my favorite person. Eventually, small pieces began to come off, and then the whole large piece came off, and he just left it behind on the road. So we stopped and moved it off, the sweet karma being that it was also his trailer's license plate. As we crossed the mighty Yukon River, we caught up again, though he turned off towards the Yukon River camp, and we took the opportunity to drive under the pipeline and to see the BLM ranger station there along the river. Despite it seeming very early in the day, just down the road from the Yukon River is 5 Mile Camp, which was our destination for the evening. This is mostly a large rectangle of dirt with some picnic tables and fire rings. We got set up on the far side and later realized that there are a couple of places where you can tuck back into the brush a little bit, But at that point, it really wasn't worth moving. Setup was quick and easy, and we were right next to a little pond. All right, first camp on the Dalton. 5-mile campground just after the Yukon River crossing. So we've got toilets and garbage and potable water, so that's pretty cool. It's not the most scenic of areas, but it will certainly do for a camp here. Before long, we got our first visitor in camp, so let's call him Yogi. We had bear spray close by, but my first instinct was to grab the camera. We noticed Yogi was getting a little close to the gentleman camped in the Tacoma, and he didn't seem to be out where he could see him approach. We started to get up and warn him and yell at the bear, but he got out of his truck, and Yogi was easily shooed away with a couple of yells, and he slowly lumbered on down the hill. We ended up having a great talk with our neighbor, and then it was time for dinner. Along with the elk bacon, we had also picked up some bison dogs while we were in Eagle River, and we cooked them up with some pork and beans. With plenty of daylight still to kill, we ventured behind the main camp area to what used to be the Hot Spot Cafe. It's said that they have the best burger in Alaska, and you can still get one. You just have to go to Fairbanks. What's left behind here on the Dalton is a cool set of modern ruins and a couple of old square body Chevys that are near and dear to my heart. As the evening went on, well, look who showed up, minus a taillight and a license plate. We took time in the morning to make coffee and breakfast. This was some more of the elk bacon and potatoes. On the way out of camp, we also took advantage of the artesian well here at 5 Mile, washing up a little bit and filling up our water jugs for the road. Just down the road was our first stop of the day at Finger Mountain. And while the actual pointy rock finger is what this area is known for, taking time to walk the interpretive trail is also well worth it. And it had a fun little stack of rocks at the end that Nicole just couldn't resist scrambling up. Wow. But the even cooler stuff lies just a ways off trail. Once again on the road, our next waypoint is the Arctic Circle. We managed to hit this turnoff right at the same time as a few other people, and we all had to take our turns at the sign, so this is what you get. Crossing the Arctic Circle sounds like something off of a kid's wish list, and it is pretty darn cool. Even better is that now you're getting closer to Coldfoot and the foothills of the beautiful Brooks Range. Coldfoot was our required fuel stop before moving on, and from here, the scenery really picks up, and one of the highlights is definitely Succopack Mountain.
Journey is not
Finally, we approach Adigan Pass. You get a brief climb here before dropping back down, and then only to start climbing again. As the highest road pass in Alaska at 4,738 feet, this one is the stuff of legends. Despite less drama for the camera, I was plenty happy that the conditions were good going up, because even with the small bits of moisture left in places, you could still feel how soft and slippery it could be when the weather is bad. With the slow and rough going, I even manually shifted down to first gear at one point on the steep incline, and by the time we had reached the top, it was the only time I have ever seen the Yukon's temperature gauges climb. Both engine and transmission were up to about 225 degrees. This is the top. Our victory was short-lived as the weather quickly turned on the descent, and we made our way on towards Galbraith Lake. While the skies continued to look sinister, the rain ended well before getting to camp. As you can see, Galbraith Lake itself is really not that close to the actual campsites, as you turn off the highway and drive past the airport and maintenance buildings. There we go, it's got some extra space around it. But you are afforded stunning views of the nearby mountains, with a large glacier making a dramatic backstop to camp. You can see that glacier?
Oh, wow.
Alright guys, so we are at the Galbraith Lake campground for the night. The lake is way off over in that direction. You're not really close to the lake at all. But what you are close to are some beautiful mountain views directly up behind you, including a glacier you can see up there. So that's by far the more interesting part than the lake, I think. But we got here, it's almost 4. Gonna make some dinner, get things ready. We've got thunder going on in the background there. Don't know if it's gonna actually rain or not yet, so there it is. We'll see. But reposition the picnic table under the awning, so we'll be ready no matter what. Guys, so it is just a hair before midnight here at Galbraith Lake, and this is the sun situation behind me. Still up pretty high in the sky, and we're still about 140 miles south of Prudhoe Bay, so pretty cool to see a true midnight sun. But yeah, so, and this is going to be the farthest night north that we spend, so we'll be farther down the road again tomorrow night. So this is pretty much it. I'm getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, so I think I'm gonna head back into bed, but just wanted to have a chance to show you guys that. It's pretty cool to be up here. As we pull away from the foothills of the Brooks Range, it begins to feel like we are truly on the north slope. We again had a long stretch behind a pilot truck through even more construction. Well guys, after being stuck between trucks doing 65 miles an hour down a very rough dirt road, which is actually kind of stressful, found a little turn off where we got away from things, took us down to the river there. Looks like a beautiful spot, so we're gonna take a little break for a moment here before we continue on. All we've seen for wildlife so far is ducks and geese. Hopes are still there, but dwindling.
Remember you and I would always find somewhere to hide when we were kids, so we could see and hear the water run. The river's gonna cry when you're gone. Where will you go? Won't you miss the ones you know? I'll be here, hanging on, waiting for your call. Seems like time.
After that brief pause, we were soon back on the road heading north, with what seemed like a never-ending line of big rigs heading in our direction. One especially fun feature is called the Ice Cut. This is a really narrow section with a blind corner at the top, and it's definitely best to go this one at a time. The road eventually turns from gravel into really crappy pavement, and then the last 50 miles is what is known as the best pavement in all of Alaska. And I would say that that is probably very true. On our way into Dead Horse, we did finally see a couple of moose and caribou, but without a muskox in sight, we were a little disappointed. But we also realized that we had been pretty spoiled with wildlife so far on our trip. We had arrived in Dead Horse well before our tour was scheduled to begin, so we made a lap through town, taking the opportunity to fuel up while we had the time. We also made the obligatory stop at the Brooks Range Supply. This is obviously another landmark sticker opportunity, while also being a general store, a Napa Auto Parts, and the post office. Luckily, we didn't need any parts for the truck, so we grabbed a couple of stickers and sweatshirts to commemorate the milestone. That's cool. Nice. After our tour of Dead Horse, we backtracked just out of town to a spot on the Saginaw River where we made a quick lunch and got to see a little more wildlife. Soon, it was time for us to load up on the tour bus that would take us through the oil field security checkpoints and finally on to the waters of the Arctic Ocean in Prudhoe Bay. It's not necessarily a scenic drive, but the driver kept it interesting, and after about 8 miles, you are at the beach.
Hi, Andy.
Hi.
We're here. It's gonna be cold. You gonna get in?
Sure. At least the bottom. The bay is quite shallow here, and the water seemed very Oregon-like for temperature. On our way back through town, we would see more caribou in town than we would see at any other time on the entire trip. When we got back to the building, we even got our official Arctic Polar Bear membership certificates, and even the people that didn't go in the water got them. So anyway, after our Arctic Ocean experience, I had set an ambitious goal for the evening, and the plan was to make it back to the Marion Creek campground that is just north of Coldfoot, but we would be stopping to make dinner somewhere along the way. But before dinner, here is an example of that bad Dalton pavement. This is the kind of thing where you are most likely to cause a flat. Gravel is much preferred over this. We stopped at a little unmarked rest area that even had a bathroom for us, and we found that we had a neighbor that was very unconcerned with our presence. He made a bed in the bushes behind where we were parked and didn't move a muscle after that. We made dinner with one of the worst bunches of mosquitoes on the entire trip. Yeah, do you believe that myth that they don't bug you when there's wind? Because I don't anymore.
We're retreating to the car to eat. Those mosquitoes are nasty, and they don't care about the wind or anything else.
Oh, dickhead.
We steadily made our way back south, passing endless big rigs, a couple of rain showers, and found ourselves once again at Adigan Pass. Heading south, the incline seems much easier than when heading north, and it was an easy climb before heading back down. We cruised on for quite a while, but ended up stopping short of Marion Creek. We found a great little spot on the river and decided to call it a night. Well, it is 12:30, and I think we found a pretty good camp for the night while avoiding a campground, so hard to beat views like this. But we're gonna go to sleep, because we've been driving a long time. As we packed up and left the river that morning, little did we know that this would be our last camp in Alaska. I had planned one more at Dead Man Lake, about 65 miles west of Fairbanks, as it made a great stop just before the Canadian border. But when we got there, it was completely full. So after making a lap through the camp, we continued on down the Alcan, and there just really weren't any great options. So the next thing we know, we are at the Canadian border.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
In the Yukon Territory, pullouts and rest areas with bear-proof garbages are plentiful, so we just planned to stop once we found a nice spot. This had appeared to be one of those nice spots, cutting back alongside the main road towards the river, but it got a little creepy and dead-ended in the bush with a really claustrophobic feel back in the dark. So we continued on longer than planned and ended up at a fairly busy rest stop. We got going quickly in the morning and made a breakfast stop at a beautiful pullout, and there I took the time to put on the spare tire on the right front, as the camber wear was getting quite bad on the inner edge of that tire. Even though we were on the way back, we still had a lot of new scenery, since on the way north, we had diverted on the Klondike Highway to hit Dawson City, and now we were taking the Cassiar Highway south through BC before linking back up with our previous route in Prince George. And it had been a weird, bittersweet feeling when we hit the Canadian border on the same day that we had left the Dalton. It felt in many ways that the adventure was over, but we were still over 2,000 miles from home. There were no more real destinations or activities, and we just had to put in the miles to get back home and get ready to face the real world again. The distance all of a sudden felt a little daunting. But we made the effort to just enjoy the moments and the new to us scenery. It's hard to get too down in such beautiful country. It's safe to say that we have left a large piece of our hearts in Alaska and the Yukon. That's no knock on our own Oregon, but there is something special in these places of the far north. Everything is just more. The mountains are taller, the glaciers are larger, and the open, wild places are almost unbelievably vast and legitimately wild. It's easy to feel like you may not always be at the top of the food chain anymore. And I think that's a good thing, to get some perspective on our place here in the world, to be reminded of what's important, what things make us truly happy, and what we can simply do without. So now that we have had the chance to see the big, broad overview experience of Alaska and absolutely fall in love, we will be back to this amazing place. And the plan is to explore it in a slower, more intimate fashion next time. There are lifetimes of adventure there, and so we'll just have to do the best that we can. But rest assured, when we go, we will take you along for the ride. Just don't forget to make time to get out for yourselves and experience this amazing world. If we can, so can you.